Alright, hello. So this is going to be a Resto Druid guide. I'll try and make it as quick as possible. Um, so basically, we are going to try and cover everything from covenants to gear to talons to all the druid abilities and a little bit of healing rotation as well. So let's get right into it. Basically, the covenant that you should be if you are playing PvP as a Resto Druid is going to be Necrolord. If you are Necrolord, then you should be running this guy, the Plague Divisor Marileth. The reason why this guy is so good is because you have the Ooze coating, so it's a 15% max HP shield every 30 seconds once you hit 50% HP, which is incredibly strong. And then you also have this, which is Ultimate Form. So basically, during your Fleshcraft, which is your Covenant ability, you are immune to CC, and you also get a little bit of healing. The healing doesn't matter though, it's the CC immunity, which allows for very fun outplays to make. And this is the Covenant ability, which is basically you form a shield for 40% of your max HP, and it'll stay on you for 2 minutes unless it gets depleted. And also, while you are channeling this, damage you take is reduced by 20%. Now, one little trick is if you just do it like in a normal form, it's really not going to be that big. It's going to be like maybe 15k. If you are running Emblem, and then you also run this little guy here, which gives you another 16% max HP while in bear form. So you will Emblem, Bear, Fleshcraft, so I have almost 80k HP, and that shield is now going to be 32k, which is massive. So you could actually do something like that before a gates open in PvP, and you can even swap your trinket, and you are very, very tanky. So like a rogue mage can't just open you straight away. Alright, so back to Marileth. When it comes to your conduits, I have started recently using floral recycling, so it can make your Swiftmend hit very, very hard. Basically, how that works is you apply Rejuve. If you Swiftmend, it's going to try and basically, it pretends like it consumes it, but because you're legendary, it doesn't, which is nice. And 52% of the consumed heal over time effect is applied to that Swiftmend healing. Now, if you Swiftmend, and then you are basically applying a Soul of Forest Rejuve now, which is going to make your Rejuve a lot stronger. When you Swiftmend again, it's going to heal a lot, so that was a 14k. And the most effective way of doing that is like holding on to your Soul of Forest somehow until it's about to expire, and then you reapply it right before it expires, and then you Swiftmend. That was a 19k one. It gets really kind of tricky when you get more hots on the target, but that's a very basic explanation of it. So, next is Well-Honed Instincts. This is very strong, gives you a free Frenzied Regeneration when you hit 40% HP. So the 50% shield will actually help you stop from proccing this. And Frenzied Regeneration is a very, very strong heal that does 30% of your HP over 3 seconds, and it will auto-proc in any form. You don't have to be in bear form. Now, it is scary if you have mind games, and people will use that to try and actually work against you. Sometimes you can heal through it, other times you may actually need a cancel aura macro, which is right here. So you want to cancel everything. That's going to be a cancel aura macro to save you from killing yourself with frenzied regen if you get a mind games on you and you're pretty low HP. So you can come out of the CC, dispel yourself, and then heal. Next, Evolve Swarm. 100% needed. It makes your Adaptive Swarm very, very strong, which is your other Covenant ability that you get aside from Fleshcraft. It is very cheap. It's a nice healing over time effect. It can also be a damage over time effect on enemies when it bounces. it gives bonus healing to every single hot on that target. So with the conduit, mine's up to 33%. And it's also amazing for purge protection. So if I have it on a target, I have 3 stacks. It requires 3 purges before it gets off of me. So if I'm like trying to get some healing out and I throw Adaptive Swarm, it's going to be a very nice purge protection for a few moments. It also applies to Resto Druid Mastery, which we will get into later. Alright, so the final ones, it's kind of up to you for the most part. Sometimes this one is nice, especially to get maybe like the larger Fleshcraft shield, and then you could actually swap it before the gates open over to Tireless Pursuit, which is very, very fun, as every time you leave cat or travel form, you retain 40% of your move speed. So as you see here, I'm very fast, and then it'll fall off. If I go into cat travel form, I'm still very, very fast. So that is nice. So next we are actually going to go ahead and move into talents. So first row, only thing you'll ever take in PvP is Send Ward. It is a insanely strong heal over time effect. It's very cheap, and it will probably be your largest hot that you can get on the target. Also, it cannot be purged, which is one of the druid's biggest weaknesses, is teams that can purge. So mages with Klepto, Resto Shaman, Shadow Priest, all that kind of stuff. And it can get extended multiple ways, which we will cover here shortly. Next row, only thing you should really be taking is Wild Charge. You can fly to teammates from 25 yards away. So if I want to fly to my teammate, it is instant. You cannot root it. You cannot do almost anything. A Windwalker can ring a piece that, but that is very hard to do. If you are in cat form, you can wild charge to an enemy while stealth and slow them. Or if you are in travel form, you can jump, wild charge, get a little bit more air with the jump, and a little bit more range. Or if you're in bear, you can wild charge to an enemy and root them. I've actually done things such as if my teammate's getting mind controlled off the ledge, you can go bear and root your teammate and keep him up with you. So that's nice. Alright, so next are all the affinities. It really depends if you're doing 2s, 3s, based on comp. Balance affinity, Typhoon is nice. Moonkin form helps you not get sheeped if you're fighting a mage team. Star Surge can hit for up to 7,400 damage if it crits, but you crit like 1 every 15 Star Surges, so it's really not that overwhelming. But Typhoon, the extra 5 yards on all your abilities is really nice, but very rarely do I ever play Balance Affinity. Feral Affinity, very good. 15% move speed. You get some amazing abilities, such as Rake, Rip, Swipe, and Maim. Basically, if we go look at these real quick, if you are in stealth, your Rake will actually stun the target for 4 seconds and do additional 60% damage over time. So that's a very strong bleed, especially if you're doing 2s or something. That's going to matter a lot. Otherwise, applying rips to targets are very, very strong too, because they are not affected by armor. So if you're fighting any sort of plate classes, rips are going to be one of your higher damages, combined with Rake and some other dots we will look at later. And then Maim is a very, very strong ability, as it is a 5-second stun if you use 5 combo points into it, which will be your longest stun in your entire kit. So if you stun somebody from stealth with a 4-second Rake, and then you maim them or bash them off of it, you just have a lot of stuns as Resto Druid. You can stun the entire enemy team, actually, which is very, very cool. But yeah, Feral is very good for 2s, especially. 3s, more if you're playing with caster, cleaves, or comps. Guardian Affinity, very strong. You take 6% reduced damage from everything, so you're tankier. You get Frenzied Regen and In-Cap Roar, both of which are very strong abilities. Obviously, Frenzied Regen just gives a very, very strong heal. Short cooldown, 30 seconds. And In-Cap Roar is very strong if you have no other in-caps on your team, such as you don't have a mage with polymorph, you don't have a hunter with traps. It is a very, very good AoE 10-yard CC for 3 seconds, interrupt casting, help with CC, continuing a chain. If an enemy trinkets and you're covering the healer, you can instantly roar them, all sorts of stuff. Next row, Bash is generally the only thing you should be taking here. Very good kill pressure, 4-second stun. You can use it in all forms. You can also stun Cyclone, a DPS, to get him off of you or save your teammate, whatever. Mass Roots, it's okay into maybe a multiple melee team, such as Windwalkers. You can root all their clones, you can root their Zwen as well. BM Hunters, you can root the pets, but at the same time, Bash is a nice win condition. Roots is more of a trying to live condition. Really good, honestly, if you're playing like Shadowplay with an Aflock, and then you play something like Deep Roots to make your roots very tanky, take a lot of damage before they break, and they won't be getting dispelled because they don't want to be eating UAs generally. Next is this row. Only thing you should be taking is Soul of the Forest. Just apply them to your rejuves and regrowths as they make those your hots, very, very strong, and your regrowth a very strong single target heal. Very good to use those, especially if you combine it with something like Nature Swiftness, which we will look at in a little bit. Next row, generally I almost always take Overgrowth, very strong healing cooldown. That's 4 different HOTS. That's a lot of globals to try and get those HOTS out. Otherwise, it is kind of expensive to use mana-wise, but it is a very good ability nonetheless. And you can also try and pair it with something like Innervate during crucial times where you're having to do a lot of healing. Spring Blossoms, maybe you can use it sometimes if you're playing like a melee cleave and they're just standing still, fighting another melee cleave, and you're just trying to get additional healing out on your team. And you don't really have enemies with purges or so. Now the last row, a lot of druids have been playing Germination. I personally have liked Flourish a lot lately. Some people kind of got me on it. It's a long cooldown, but it is a very strong ability, especially considering it can extend your Send Ward and make all those hots on the target buffed for 8 seconds. And during that 8 seconds, all your team is also getting that buff, right? So use Flourish. All your hots are now ticking twice as fast. There's like the duration is still going to be there, but the hots are ticking very, very, very quickly. So normally your Send Ward, when it's on a target, ticks every 1.7 seconds. It's going to be every 0.85 seconds though during Flourish, which is very, very good. Also, Flourish works through Rogue Smoke Bomb, and it also works through Rogue Shadowy Duel, so it just has a lot of different utilities that go hand in hand with it. Germination is still good. You can still do plenty well with it. I just think Flourish is overall better. It also saves you a lot of mana, not having to keep 2 rejuves up all the time. You get to sit on a lot more Soul of the Forest. There's just a lot of good things about it, I'd say. So, I do believe that is it for talents. Even into teams that have Spam Purge, if you can't get a Swiftmend out to extend your Send Ward, Flourish will help you get that extension on your Send Ward and then hopefully be able to get out your HOTS in time. So it just synergizes insanely well with Resto Druid kit currently, I'd say. Next is we're going to look at legendaries briefly. So I just do it in this order, basically after talking about extensions. Verdant Infusion is the healing legendary you're going to want to run every single time in 3s and a lot of times in 2s. Swiftmend will no longer consume a hot whenever you use it, and your all your healing over time effects on that target are extended by 10 seconds. So you're extending Send Ward, Flourish can extend Send Ward, and you're just getting all sorts of extensions, very global efficient. You don't have to be reapplying those hots, you're saving mana, you're extending your Adaptive Swarm as well. It's very, very good with both of these things. With that in mind, if you are doing it effectively, Send Ward goes from an 8-second heal to a 28-second heal, not even including Flourish. Because what happens is you put it on a target, once it procs, it's 8 seconds. You Swift Mend, it can now be a 18-second heal if you do it instantly, and your Swift Mend will come off cooldown before your Send Ward falls off. So you can Swift Mend a second time before it's off cooldown, which means you now have a 28-second Send Ward out of 30 seconds because it's a 30-second cooldown. So it's a very mana efficient ability, very healing efficient. You should be Swift Mending it even if your target's 100% HP and your Send Ward it needs the extension, especially with the Adaptive Swarm. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in no man's land, and you're going to be very behind on healing probably for about 15 seconds or so, and you might have to use awkward cooldowns. Druid is very reliant on extending Send Ward currently, and that is a massive part of their kit. So let's go ahead and move on to, actually I guess we'll make a quick brief note. Draw Nate Focus is another legendary you can run. It's mainly for 2s only. If you use it, just try and only keep one rejuve out on a single target, and it just makes all your dots very, very strong. It's very fun in 2s. You can do a lot of damage, but you can still do plenty well with Verdant Infusion. I got to 2700, never even touching Draw to Deep Focus. So you don't need it to do well. It can be very good though based on your comp. Next, we will go ahead and look at PvP talents. So, Disentanglement, it's good if you're fighting an Aflock and they're running around circles on pillars, or maybe you have a ranged on your team and you're trying to help them kite melee. You can put a shroom on the ground, and every single time they take a tick of healing from it, it will remove all their slows. So it's not bad, but I very rarely use it. If the enemy team has melee on their team, or even BM Hunter pets, Reactive Resin is very good. It extends your rejuve on the target, and if that rejuve is buffed by Soul of the Forest, that is a very strong extension and very efficient. So that's very good to use. I almost never touch Entangling Bark. Iron Bark's such a long cooldown, you get very little value out of this. Thorns, very, very good into melees. Unless there's a mage on the enemy team and you have melees on your team, you don't want to be giving them thorns for free. If there's 2 purges on the enemy team, that's also not that good because thorns is kind of expensive. So it really depends on the situation, but generally if the enemy team does have melee, even if it's just BM Hunter pets, thorns can be very, very good to run. It's also a good way to try and kite melee that are maybe want to sit you a lot. If you are bear, you put thorns on yourself. They either want to get off you, or they're also getting slowed by 50% every single time they hit into it. So that's a nice thing to kite with as well. Deep Roots, mentioned that before. Really only use it generally with Mass Roots, or if you're playing with an Aflock or something in 2s where you're just having to spam root melee DPS a lot. High Winds, it's okay. It's not really that great right now. Maybe it'll be better in 9.1 when it gets a MS effect on it. But it can be decent, especially if you're fighting maybe a Windwalker or something with a lot of burst that you can clone their damage. They'll maybe trinket it to try and still pop off, but they do 30% less damage. So Windwalkers, Rets, that kind of stuff. Not too bad. Early Spring, you can use it into priests that play Thoughtsteal. That's kind of the only time, or just the caster comp that you don't really have any other talents to take. I very rarely use this ability. But the reason why I say during Thought Steal is it makes Wild Growth an instant cast, and Wild Growth is something that you can actually Swift Mend off of. So if you can't put up rejuves, that is an option. Master Shapeshifter, it's good in 2s. If you're playing like Feral Affinity, Master Shapeshifter, and Draw to Deep Focus, you're going to have a lot of bleed damage. Very fun. But for you to get use of it, you do have to be in cat form. So you can't just like apply the bleeds, instantly leave cat form. You lose that 30% damage bonus. You have to go back into cat form to regain the bonus, or just stay in cat form the entire time. Focus growth, very strong to just use it generally speaking. I don't always use it, but most of the time I do. You just apply Life Bloom. I'm not in PvP war mode right now, but when you get 3 stacks, it's good. Every single time your Life Bloom falls down to 5 seconds, you see it goes red there, you can reapply it, it'll bloom, give you the heal, keep you 3 stacks. Very good to do. Mark of the Wild. It's a little bit of a purge protection. It's not a bad ability to use. It is good into things such as Frost Decay, Ellie's, anything that really has Nature, Fire, Frost, and Arcane damage over time effects, or anything that does AoE spells. The only thing is, though, sometimes you don't want to maybe give it to a Fire Mage because they can just klepto it. Now they have even more things on them if your team's trying to purge off a Combust. Or maybe you have like a Frost Decay on your team, now you just nerfed your Decay by giving them Mark of the Wild. So take it into consideration if you want to use it. Alright, so next we are moving briefly onto race, whatever you want to choose when playing your Druid. Night Elf is the best version of Druid in my opinion. You get Shadow Meld, so you can go like Cat, Meld, Rake Stun. You don't even need to leave combat. You can also Meld Drink. Night Elf is very, very strong. Otherwise, if you are Horde, because that is where you will get more PvP generally these days, you can just War Stomp, which is a strong ability, as you can War Stomp clone people. You can War Stomp through Evasion, you can War Stomp through Shadowy Duel by Rogues, you can War Stomp parry by Warriors and then get the clone off. You can War Stomp Windwalkers with all their clones, stop their Fist of Fury, a lot of different things you can do with War Stomp. Same with like Resto Shamis, you can War Stomp into Cyclones so they can't shear or ground it. A lot of things you can do. So we are going to look briefly at gear and stats real quick. Generally speaking, you're going to want to go Haste Verse. As Verse, you do start getting a little bit of diminishing returns once you go past 30%, so I don't know if it's worth it. I think it's still pretty good too, but I like the stats I have, to each their own. Haste is really good so that your globals are a little bit quicker, your cast time is quicker, you will get maybe another tick or so out of your hot over the same duration, so that's good. And mastery, you can get a little bit of mastery if you'd like, as Druid is a stacking hot healer. So every single hot I put on a target, further healing is increased by whatever mastery percentage is. So mine's 7%. So if I overgrowth, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 hots. You do 4 times 7%, which is my current mastery. You get a 28% hot healing bonus to everything further in that sense. So you apply all your hots, including your adaptive swarm, and then you also apply Send Ward at the very end, so that gets very buffed, and you have very, very, very strong hots on your guy. Now, looking briefly at gems, just kind of go whatever you need to knock out. Mine are kind of all over the place between gems and enchants. Make sure you probably want to get the speed gem for every socket if you have full sockets, as you get a nice speed buff. Get your back enchant with the speed increase and 20 stam. Chest enchant can be 30 int or 20 int with 6 mana. Wrist enchant, the 15 intellect is very good. Also, if you wanted to see what the name of this gem is, it is the Startling Jewel Doublet. And then just make sure you get gems and your ring enchants. As for your trinkets, go emblem or insignia, kind of up to you. Depends on the team. It's nice to get the bonus haste, but it's also very safe to run the insignia. Alright, so briefly looking at all the forms you have as Druid. Whenever you're in forms, keep in mind that you can shift polys, hexes, all that kind of stuff. But when you're shifting, you can go bear. But instead of waiting for the entire global to go into your next form, you can go bear, cancel, feral. So let me show you what that looks like if you weren't canceling. This is as fast as that goes without canceling. And then if you cancel, it's bear, cancel, feral. That did not go. I don't know why it's not going as quickly as normal. Yeah, it's quicker. It's a good way to shift polys. You see how feral goes on global there, but everything else, it kind of depends on what form you're in. Okay, so there, it depends on your overall global cooldown as well. So you see how everything kind of goes on its own GCD when it comes to forms a lot of times. So it's a good way to shift forms and avoid getting polyed, avoid hexes. It removes slows every time you shift and cancel. Very strong abilities. As for the cancel form macro, you just have this as your macro. Cancel form, bind it to a keybind, and you're good to go. Alright, so the last thing we're going to, or second last thing we're going to go over is kind of a general look over abilities real quick. So Barkskin, generally you don't want to use that unless you are stunned or you don't have a trinket. If you're not stunned, you probably want to try and use Ironbark first. Skin is very good, 20% damage reduction for 12 seconds. You can use it while stunned and everything. It's only a 1 minute cooldown, not too bad. But if you don't have Ironbark and you don't have Trinket, you are a very good kill target. So, next is... I'm sorry, I just had to look at something real quick. Okay, so... Why did that? Sorry about that. It's weird. Okay. So, Cyclone is the next ability. Very, very strong. You can Cyclone a single target up to 3 times. Each one's DR'd. So 6 seconds, 3 seconds, 1.5 seconds. So you can CC a target for 10.5 seconds. It's very strong. You can't cast a Cyclone into a Cyclone. You have to wait for the first one to end. It is a little expensive to do 3 Cyclones on a guy, so generally maybe do like 2 Cyclones and then swap it to another target if you can. Cycloning a target low and going from there is a good thing to do. Dash, it's a good ability, makes you fast. You can use it while in stealth as well and it will not break stealth, so you can reposition, avoid CC, whatever you need to do. Roots, it's a good ability as it's 35-yard range. You can cast it on melee and it will not put you in stealth, so it's a good use of your global. If you are trying to get stealth off, CC the enemy team at the same time, and then maybe go for a rake stun, reposition, whatever you gotta do. Ferocious Bite, you can use it with 25 energy, but if you get to 50 energy, it will get 100% bonus damage. It doesn't hit for a lot though, unless the target's maybe like a cloth user or leather user, as armor is affected by it. So generally you want to use your combo points into maims or rips.
Next is Growl. It's a good way to keep combat like into a rogue mage team. If they're trying to sap you or something and you don't want to be leaving bear as you are scared of dying, you can just Growl them, keep them in combat. It's no mana cost. Next is Hibernate. You can use it on druids, shamans in wolf form, Night Fae, I believe. Whenever they use their little teleport ability, you can actually hibernate those as well. You can hibernate hunter pets as long as they're not undead. Iron Fur, if you are Guardian Affinity, I guess you actually get it without Guardian Affinity. But Iron Fur gives you 500 armor, makes you a little bit tankier. It's a good use if you're just sitting in bear getting trained by melee. You can generate rage with Mangle while in bear form. Moonfire, it's a good damage over time effect. It's fairly cheap, very good to use. Keep 100% uptime, especially if you're playing Draw to Deep Focus in 2s. Prowl, it kind of depends. I like using Prowl. Sometimes you can even use like a weak aura like this if you want. So sometimes it's hard to tell when your stealth breaks, especially if it's a very chaotic situation. So having a little Prowl or weak aura will help you from noticing when it does break, so you don't keep running into the enemy team if it's already broken, especially if it's like a last second thing. Regrowth, it's a very good single target healing, but you want to try and have a regrowth hot already on a target before you NS them if you can, as the NS regrowth will have a 40% crit chance effect, bonus crit chance effect of critting if you have a regrowth hot already on that target, so that is a very good thing to keep in mind. So like even into like rogue mage, something I've kind of looked at maybe trying to do lately is if I know which target they want to open, I will regrowth them, swift mend them, go in stealth, and now what I can do to save my guy from stealth is I can just NS them from stealth. So I have a very good chance of regrowth critting, so I'll just come out of stealth, NS, that was 24k heal, but if it crits, it's going to be up to like 45k or so. Very, very strong heal without MS. Shred, you can use it to build combo points while in cat form if you're doing 2s. 20% bonus damage against bleeding targets, and then you never really use it while stealth. You always just generally rake while stealth. It's kind of costly in energy, so just gotta be careful to always try and keep your dots up if you're trying to do a lot of damage. Dots are a lot more effective than spam shredding generally, if you are starved on globals. Soothe, you don't use it generally too much. You can use it into ferals and warriors on some stuff. Stampeding Roar, good way to help your team catch up to an enemy. It's very nice mobility. Wrath, very rarely use it. Insanely cheap, but it doesn't do a ton of damage. You have to get a lot of Wraths off, so generally just doing damage as Feral is good. Otherwise, Wrath is a little bit of damage while keeping a safe distance. Efflorescence, generally you don't put them down unless maybe you're also running like Spring Blossom. And then you generally kind of need almost 2 targets at least to be standing on it for the general duration of it, which is 30-second duration. It's generally not a large part of a druid kit. Innovate, generally you can just combine it with Overgrowth if you want, or you can just keybind it so that when you have to spam something like Regrowth a lot, it's not a bad ability to use. Your Dispel can get rid of hexes, polys, poisons. It's very, very important to get your team out of CC. Have them play. NS, as I said before, generally you almost ever use it in PvP for regrowth, and trying to combine it with a Soul of the Forest as well. And if you can, also already have a regrowth hot on that target, so when you do swiftmend them, let's see if we can get a crit this time. No crit, we'll try it again later. Rejuve, very primary part of your healing factor on your targets. You want to always try and make sure your Rejuve has a Soul of the Forest. Without, it's 680. With, it's 2040. That is a massive difference, not even having other hots to try and get a larger mastery bonus. Rip, it's a good way to do damage if you are doing 2s with all the Draught of Deep Focus and Master Shapeshifter, but it's really not needed a lot of times, as maiming people with your 5 combo points a lot of times can be better to just get the CC out. Depends on your playstyle and your comp. Sunfire, very expensive, doesn't really do nearly as much as Moonfire does, so generally you don't need to use this too much. Swiftmend, obviously that extends everything with the legendary that you should be running. Verdant Infusion, very, very strong. Swipe, good way to try and get people out of stealth as bear and cat form. Tranquility, you should only really ever be using it during Innervate, as it's kind of a waste of mana outside of it, does very little healing. And so if I have like Innervate on myself and then I use Tranquility, I can get like a single hot out to get the mastery bonus and also possibly try and juke a kick from the enemy team, but just do one hot and then go back to your healing rotation. Vortex, very, very good ability. I use a mouse over macro to instantly put down vortexes. You can try and get Warrior's Leaps, you can get Windwalker ports, Warlock ports. You can get a lot of mobility from the enemy team with it. It's a very strong ability. If you're playing with something like a TSG, you want to try and vortex during your team's go, which is usually like Blinding Sleet. It lines up, both are 1 minute cooldowns. They try and get their chill streak off during the Blinding Sleet or whatever it's called, and you should be good to go. Wild Growth, as I said, rarely ever use the ability. Just not, it's very expensive, and it's not a ton of healing compared to everything else. Every time you do get your Omen of Clarity procs, which comes from having Life Bloom on somebody, you can get a free cast of Regrowth. A lot of times that's the only time you want to be casting Regrowth, as Regrowths are a chance to get locked out. There it is, that's the animation, and this is the icon. So Regrowth is now a free cast, and a very nice hot to get out, and a nice instant, or not instant, but large single target healing. Usur's Gift, it just heals whoever, generally. If you are not 100% HP, it will focus you, and then it will focus your teammates outside of that. So that kind of goes over just all of the Druid abilities. Everything does have different interactions with stuff, but like a very brief overview real quick of healing rotations after looking at everything. Resto Druid is a very proactive healer. If you fall behind, you're trying to do too much, you will realize that your team is now 50% with no hots and you are in a pickle. As you are proactive, you have to have hots out. It takes a lot of globals to do everything and be effective with it and not burn through all your mana and your cooldowns. Now, in that regard, you want to try and always keep Send Ward up on the targets that's taking a lot of damage. If they swap targets, then generally you should be trying to save Soul of the Forest to swap to the next target, or you can overgrowth the target when they swap, whatever you need to do. Your healing rotation should always generally be having a Rejuve and Life Bloom on your focused target, and then you want to be throwing Adaptive Swarm. If they're far away, it could take up to 4 seconds or so for it to even connect to that target. Then you can Send Ward once you have all your hots out that you may be getting off, and then once your Send Ward procs, you can Swift Mend to extend it all. Now your target should be chilling for the most part. You may need to sometimes spam cast Regrowth. It depends on the situation, but if you can avoid having to spam cast Regrowth, that is the ideal situations for Druids. You can put like a life bloom on the other target, especially if you're playing germination. You can have two rejuves out at a time. But as I said before, I am a huge fan of playing Flourish lately. Uh, it's just a very, very strong healing cooldown. It'll make it so you don't have to burn your mana as much. You don't get put in these situations where you spam cast Regrowth. So if you Flourish everything, all this stuff is ticking twice as fast, but it's still going to be there for the same duration until Flourish is gone. Same for every hot you applied during that time period. So a lot of times if you are trying to save your teammate, like you come out of CC or something, your guy is dying, sometimes you may just need to NS without pressing anything else. Otherwise, if you have like all your cooldowns, you can overgrowth your guy into Swift Mend into NS. That was a 60k heal right there. Now I've seen heals all the way up to 93k is the largest one I've ever gotten. That's just based on certain buffs that are going on, based on if I have the other Adaptive Swarm and Sun Ward also on my guy, and that's just going to be your most bursty heal is getting that NS off. As I said before though, you want to try and make sure that you have that regrowth on your guy and a Swift Mend into NS. That's going to be how you get your largest NS out. You can't always do that though. If your guy gets into a duel or something, you may have to like rejuve Swift Mend yourself, and then when your guy comes out of the duel, you have your Soul of the Forest ready, and then you can NS your guy the instant he's out of that duel. So you can like, you don't want to be spamming it though, because if you already have your NS just sitting on you, it could get purged. It's a little risky too with your Soul of the Forest. Sometimes you'll have to NS without getting your Swift Mend off, especially if you're getting spam purged or something. And it's a very small heal. I mean, that just did only 8k. So you want to try and avoid using NS regrowth without it. And when NS regrowth is really the only thing you should be using, so just use macro like this to cast your NS. So, I do believe that is basically the rundown for Druid. Just try and keep pots up on your target. You got situations are very dependent on when you should be ironbarking people, when you should be using all your cooldowns. Feel free to come into my stream. I'll have the link in the description. I am more than happy to answer all questions. I hope this guide helped. And I appreciate everybody that helped me to get this guide out. And please let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover more, maybe in another little small guide or whatever. Thanks, and have a great day.